My sister left her boyfriend and said he should be with me instead. Now he's trying to date me and she's encouraging it, but I don't know if this is what I want. I'm 33, have a pretty good relationship with my sister Emma, 31. We grew up in a close-knit family, just the two of us, and for the most part, we've always been there for each other. Emma's the more outgoing one, always the life of the party, the center of attention, and someone who's never short of friends. I'm quieter, more of a homebody. I think that's why we've complemented each other so well over the years. Emma's been with her boyfriend, Mark, 34, for almost 5 years now. He's a fine. He's not a bad guy, just a bit distant sometimes. They've had their ups and downs like any couple, but they seem pretty solid overall. Recently, though, Emma's been hinting that she's not happy in their relationship. She'd drop little comments like, "I just don't know if he's the one anymore," or "Sometimes I feel like I'm settling." I'd listen, offer support, but I never really knew what to say. It's not like Mark was treating her badly or anything. He just seemed kind of detached. So last week, Emma calls me out of the blue and asks if I want to meet her for lunch. She picked this cute cafe we used to go to as kids, so I knew she had something serious to talk about. When I got there, she looked anxious, twisting her hands together like she does when she's nervous. "I need to ask you something huge," she blurted out after we'd barely sat down. I immediately braced myself. Was she pregnant? Getting married? Breaking up with Mark? 1,000 thoughts flew through my mind, but I definitely didn't expect what she said next. "I want to break up with Mark," she said, her voice low and trembling, "but I need a way out. I don't want him to be alone. And I was thinking, what if I set you two up?" I sat there, stunned. My mind couldn't process her words at first. I mean, who says that? Who actually thinks their sibling would want to date their soon-to-be ex? "Emma, what are you talking about?" I managed to stammer out. "Why would you even think I'd be interested in Mark?" "It's not like that," she rushed to say, leaning forward. "I know it sounds crazy, but you two get along so well. And sometimes I think maybe you'd be better for him. You're calm, you're steady. Everything I'm not." I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. Shock, anger, confusion, and maybe a tiny hint of curiosity, which I hated myself for feeling. "Emma, you can't just pass him off to me like some kind of, I don't know, old sweater you don't want anymore," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm not doing that," she insisted, eyes wide and pleading. "It's just, I care about him, but I'm not in love with him anymore. I can't give him what he needs, but I think you might be able to." "Emma, that's not how it works. You can't just decide that I'd be a better fit and then hand him over. We're not pieces on a chessboard." She took a deep breath, looking away for a moment. "I know. It's just, I'm scared, okay? I feel like if I break up with him, he'll be devastated. He's invested so much in this relationship, in me, and I know I haven't been fair to him. But I've seen the way he talks to you, how his eyes light up when you're around. I didn't know what to say. Sure, Mark and I had always gotten along, but it was because I was Emma's sister. Nothing more. At least, that's what I'd always thought." Now, sitting across from her, I felt like the ground under my feet was shifting. "Please, just think about it," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm not asking you to date him or anything right away. Just maybe spend some time with him after we break up. He's a good guy, and I don't want him to be alone." I shook my head, feeling like I was in some kind of alternate reality. "I can't promise anything, Emma. I mean, I don't even know what to say. This is insane." "I know," she said, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "But think about it, okay? Please." Lunch after that was awkward and stilted, both of us pretending everything was normal, when clearly it wasn't. I left feeling more confused than I'd ever been in my life. My own sister was trying to set me up with her boyfriend. It felt wrong on so many levels, but A small part of me kept replaying the look in her eyes when she said she thought Mark and I would be better together. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to untangle my thoughts. Had I ever felt anything for Mark? I didn't think so, but Emma's words had planted a seed of doubt, and now I was questioning everything. That night, I got a text from Mark. Just a casual, "Hey, haven't seen you in a while. Wanna grab a coffee sometime?" It was such a normal message, but in light of what Emma had said, it felt loaded with meaning. I didn't know if she'd already talked to him about breaking up, or if he had any clue what was going on. But I agreed to meet him, just to see, just to understand. And now, I'm not sure what I'm walking into. When I agreed to meet Mark for coffee, I kept telling myself it was just out of curiosity. I needed to get some clarity, figure out what he knew, if anything, and how to talk to Emma about all this. But as soon as I walked into the cafe and saw him sitting there, looking genuinely happy to see me, I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. Was I really about to discuss what my sister had suggested? "Hey, stranger," he greeted me with a grin as I sat down. "It's been a while." I forced a smile. "Yeah, it has. How've you been?" We made small talk for a bit. It was the usual stuff, work, life updates, a few inside jokes about the holidays. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was an unspoken tension in the air, like we were both tiptoeing around something bigger. My mind kept going back to Emma's words. Had he noticed her pulling away? Did he sense something was off? Then Mark leaned back, looking at me with a more serious expression. "Actually, there's something I wanted to talk to you about." My heart skipped a beat. Here it is, I thought, bracing myself. "I'm worried about Emma," he said quietly. "Okay, not what I was expecting." I sat up straighter, trying to gauge where this was going. "What do you mean?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I feel like she's been different lately. Distant, you know? She's not herself. And whenever I ask her if something's wrong, she just brushes it off." I swallowed, wondering how much I should say. Should I tell him what Emma had confided in me? Would that even help? Before I could decide, he kept going. "I know relationships have rough patches, but I'm starting to think maybe I'm the problem. Like, maybe I'm not enough for her anymore." He looked genuinely hurt, his shoulders slumped. I don't know what to do. I felt an uncomfortable twist in my chest. Here was this guy, clearly struggling, and I knew my sister was planning to leave him. But I couldn't betray her trust by spilling everything. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Mark, it's not all on you. Emma's complicated sometimes. She might just be going through something personal." "Yeah, maybe," he murmured, but he didn't seem convinced. I don't want to lose her. She's everything to me." There was such raw vulnerability in his voice that I couldn't help but feel for him. Despite everything, I found myself reaching across the table and placing a hand on his arm. "You're a good guy, Mark. Don't beat yourself up too much." He glanced at my hand, then back up at me, a strange look crossing his face, something I couldn't quite place. I quickly pulled my hand back, feeling awkward. But before I could dwell on it, he smiled. "Thanks. That means a lot coming from you." There was a moment of silence, and I couldn't help but wonder if he'd ever looked at me like this before. Had I just been oblivious, or was there something shifting between us now? The thought made me uncomfortable, and I changed the subject, steering us back into safer territory. After that, we finished our coffee, and as we were saying goodbye, Mark hesitated, like he wanted to say more. But then he just gave me a tight smile and a wave, heading off in the opposite direction. I watched him go, feeling conflicted. When I got home that evening, I couldn't get the conversation out of my head. Mark's face, his voice, the way he seemed so lost. It was all replaying in a loop, making me feel guilty and unsure. I kept thinking about what Emma had said, that I might be a better match for him. Was she right? Had I really been missing something all these years? I tried to push the thoughts away, but the more I resisted, the more they lingered. Eventually, I decided I needed to talk to Emma again. I couldn't keep going like this, walking on eggshells and wondering what was real. So I called her. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey, what's up?" she asked, her tone upbeat. It almost made me wonder if I'd imagined the tension from our last conversation. "I met up with Mark today," I blurted out. I hadn't planned on starting the conversation like that, but now that the words were out, I couldn't take them back. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh," she said finally. "How did it go?" I hesitated, unsure how honest I should be. "It was fine, I guess. He's worried about you." "Worried?" She sounded genuinely surprised. "About what?" "About you pulling away, about the relationship. He thinks he's the problem." Emma let out a long sigh. "That's exactly what I mean," she muttered, mostly to herself. "He's such a good guy, but we're not working anymore. And I don't know how to end it without crushing him." "Then don't end it like this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't try to pawn him off on me. Just be honest with him, Emma." She didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "I'm trying to be fair to both of you, you know." "Fair," I repeated, incredulous. "Setting him up with your sister doesn't exactly scream fair." "I know," she admitted. I hate the idea of him being alone, but I can't keep pretending everything's okay between us." "Then tell him that," I said quietly, "before things get even messy, eh?" Emma was silent for a moment, and I could practically hear her thinking through the phone. "You're right," she said finally. "I'll talk to him. But if we do break up, would you at least consider spending some time with him? As a friend, if nothing else." I let out a frustrated breath. "I don't know, Emma. I really don't." "Just think about it, okay?" she pleaded. "Promise me that." "Fine," I agreed, though it felt like I was crossing some invisible line just by saying it. "I'll think about it." When we hung up, I felt exhausted. I wanted to believe that things would settle down after Emma talked to Mark, but something told me that wasn't going to be the case. And as much as I hated to admit it, a tiny part of me was already wondering what it would be like if things did change between Mark and me. I pushed the thought away, telling myself it didn't matter. For now, I just needed to see what happened next. A couple of days later, Emma texted me saying she'd finally had the talk with Mark. She didn't go into details, but her message sounded drained and resigned, like the conversation had taken a lot out of her. "We broke up," she wrote simply. "It's done." I sat there, staring at my phone, unsure of how to respond. This was it. The breakup she'd been struggling with for months. I knew it was what she wanted, what she'd been gearing up for. But somehow I still felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. I took a deep breath and replied, "How are you holding up?" Her response was immediate, relieved mostly, but worried about him. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me was glad she'd finally been honest with him, but another part of me wondered what exactly she'd told him, and if my name had come up in the conversation. Before I could overthink it, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Mark. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message, anxiety gripping my chest. I knew I should reply, but I had no idea what to say. Did he want to talk about the breakup? About what Emma had said to him? Or was this something else entirely? After a few minutes of debating with myself, I typed back, "Sure. Want to meet somewhere." We agreed on a small park near my place, a quiet spot where we'd occasionally bumped into each other while jogging or walking our dogs. It felt weirdly casual for what I was sure would be an uncomfortable conversation, but maybe that was the point. When I arrived, Mark was already there, sitting on one of the benches, staring out at the pond. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much since the breakup. I hesitated for a second, then walked over and sat down next to him. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," he echoed, giving me a faint smile. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course." "I'm sorry about everything," I said, even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. "For the breakup? For being dragged into this mess? For not knowing what to say. He shrugged, then let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, well, it's been coming for a while, I guess. I can't say I'm surprised. I bit my lip, unsure of how to respond. I knew Emma hadn't been happy, but to hear Mark talk about it so plainly made me realize how much he'd been hurting too. She told me she thinks you and I would be better together. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned to look at him, my heart racing. She told you that? Yeah. He let out a breath, shaking his head. She said she's been holding on because she didn't want to hurt me, but she thinks you and I don't know, that maybe we could be something. Crazy, right? I don't know what to say, Mark, and I didn't. I felt completely blindsided. Did she really say that? He nodded, looking down at his hands. Yeah, she did. Said she didn't want me to be alone, that she thought I'd be happier with you. He let out a frustrated sigh. And now I don't know what to think. I've been trying to figure out if she's right. Have I been ignoring something between us? Have you? My pulse quickened. Mark, I know. I mean, we've always gotten along, but I never thought of you like that. You're my sister's boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend. I never considered, but now you are. He finished for me, his voice soft but pointed. Aren't you? The question hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. I felt my throat tighten as I searched for the right words. I don't know, maybe, but it doesn't feel right. It feels like we're betraying her or something. She's the one who put the idea in our heads, he reminded me gently. I'm just trying to figure out what to do now that it's there. I looked away, staring out at the pond as if it held all the answers. I hadn't realized how much Emma's suggestion had gotten to me until now. Maybe I had been subconsciously thinking about it. Maybe there had always been something lingering between Mark and me, something we'd both pushed aside out of loyalty to Emma. But now that she'd brought it into the open, it felt like a crack had formed in the walls we'd built around those feelings. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to patch it up. Look, I'm not saying we need to figure this out right now, Mark said, breaking the silence. I wanted to be honest with you. I don't want to pretend I'm not thinking about what she said. I nodded slowly. I get it, but I think we need some space to figure out what we really feel, without Emma's words hanging over us. Yeah, he agreed, though he looked reluctant. You're probably right. We sat there for a while longer, not saying much, just letting the silence settle between us. When we finally stood up to leave, Mark hesitated again. Can we at least stay in touch? He asked quietly. I don't want to lose you two, you know? Something about the way he said it made my heart ache. We can stay in touch, I agreed, even though I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do. Just, let's take things slow, okay? He nodded, his gaze lingering on me for a second too long. Yeah, slow. We said goodbye, and as I watched him walk away, I felt more confused than ever. What did it mean that he wanted to stay in touch? Did it mean he really was considering something more with me? Or was it just the loneliness talking? And what did it say about me that I wasn't running in the opposite direction? When I got home, I found myself staring at my phone, debating whether to call Emma. I needed to know more about what she'd told Mark, why she'd put that idea in his head in the first place. But a part of me didn't want to hear it. I was afraid of what she might say, of how tangled things could get if we kept pulling at these threads. Instead, I ended up texting her a short message. I talked to Mark. We're trying to figure things out. Her reply came almost instantly. I'm glad. Just promise me one thing. I frowned, my fingers hovering over the screen. What's that? Promise me you'll be honest with yourself, she wrote. If you have feelings for him, don't ignore them just because of me. I want both of you to be happy, even if it's not with me. I stared at her words, feeling a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite define. I didn't know if I had feelings for Mark, but the fact that she was pushing me to explore them made everything more complicated. Okay, I finally typed back. I promise. But even as I hit send, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because being honest with myself meant facing questions I wasn't sure I wanted the answers to. After my conversation with Mark and the texts with Emma, I felt like I was living in a fog. Every thought seemed to circle back to the same questions. What was I doing? Was I really considering something with Mark? I needed a distraction, something to get my head on straight. So, I threw myself into work, spent more time at the gym, and even started volunteering on weekends. Anything to avoid thinking about what might be simmering between me and Mark. But he didn't make it easy. He kept texting me simple, friendly messages like he always had. But every time his name popped up on my screen, my heart would do this weird fluttery thing I couldn't control. I'd take forever to respond, second-guessing every word I typed. It was exhausting. One Friday evening, after a particularly long and stressful week, Mark texted me again. This time, it wasn't just small talk. Wanna grab dinner? I could use some company and I'd love to catch up. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep that distance we'd talked about, to keep things from getting any messier than they already were. But another part of me, one that I was starting to recognize more and more, wanted to see him. I wanted to know how he was doing, what he was thinking. I wanted to know if the tension between us was something real or just the aftermath of Emma's breakup. So I agreed. We met at a quiet little Italian place not far from my apartment. It was cozy, with dim lighting and a low hum of conversation around us. Mark was already there when I arrived, and when he saw me, he smiled. A genuine smile that reached his eyes, the kind I hadn't seen in a long time. "Hey," he greeted me, standing up as I approached the table. "You look great." I felt myself blush a little, hating how much his compliment affected me. "Thanks. You too." We settled into easy conversation, talking about work, friends, and everything in between. It almost felt normal, like the kind of catch-up we used to have before all this. But there was an undercurrent of something else, a subtle shift in how he looked at me, how our knees brushed under the table and neither of us moved away. It wasn't until we were halfway through dinner that Mark brought up Emma. "I talked to her yesterday," he said, his voice careful. "She's doing okay, I think." I nodded, not sure where this was going. "She texted me too. She seems to be handling things better than I expected." "Yeah," he murmured, looking down at his plate. "She said she's relieved in a way, but she's also still worried about us." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He let out a long breath, then glanced up at me, his expression almost tentative. "She's worried that she's made things weird between us, that she put too much pressure on us with everything she said. I told her I'm the one who wanted to see you, that you didn't owe me anything just because of what she said." I felt a flicker of relief at his words. "I'm glad you told her that, because it's true, Mark. You don't owe me anything either. We don't have to force anything just because she thought whatever she thought." He nodded slowly. "I know, but I also know that I want to keep seeing you. As a friend, if nothing else. I miss talking to you. I miss you." There it was again, that subtle shift, the air around us growing thicker, more charged. I swallowed, trying to ignore the way his words sent a shiver down my spine. "I miss you too," I admitted softly. "But we need to be careful, for our own sakes and for Emma's. I don't want her to think she's caused a mess by bringing us together." "Do you think that's what she's done?" he asked, his gaze steady on mine. "Brought us together?" I hesitated, my mind racing. "I don't know. Maybe she just pushed us to see something that was already there. Or maybe we're only seeing it now because of what she said. It's hard to tell what's real and what's just projection." He considered that for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, it is. But I'm willing to figure it out if you are." There was a vulnerability in his words that made me want to reach across the table and squeeze his hand. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, but let's take it slow." No pressure, no expectations. Slow, he agreed, smiling faintly. I can do that. We finished the rest of dinner in a more relaxed silence. When we finally left the restaurant, Mark walked me to my car. The night air was cool, and I wrapped my coat tighter around myself, feeling oddly nervous. "So, this was nice," I said awkwardly, fidgeting with my keys. "I'm glad we did it." "Me too," he murmured, his gaze lingering on my face. "Can I ask you something, though?" I nodded, my heart beating a little too fast. "If things had been different, if Emma hadn't said anything, do you think you'd ever have thought about us this way?" The question took me by surprise, and I found myself searching for an answer I wasn't sure I had. I don't know, Mark. I honestly don't. But now that the idea's there, I guess I'm wondering what if. He gave me a small, sad smile. "Yeah, me too." We stood there for a moment, the unspoken words heavy between us. Then, before I could overthink it, I leaned in and hugged him. It was just a quick, friendly hug, but I could feel how tense he was, how much he was holding back. When I pulled away, there was something unguarded in his eyes, something that made me think, maybe this could be more. "Good night, Mark," I whispered, stepping back. "Good night, Lily," he replied, his voice low and almost hopeful. I got into my car and drove home in silence, my thoughts swirling. The dinner had been nice, even enjoyable, but it had also left me with more questions than answers. Was I really developing feelings for Mark, or was this just the fallout of Emma's suggestion? When I got home, I found another text from Emma. "How did it go? Did you guys have fun?" I sighed, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. I didn't know how to answer her, didn't know what to say. So I settled for the truth. We had a good time, but we're taking things slow. No pressure, no expectations. Her reply came almost immediately. "Good. That's all I want for you. For both of you." I stared at the screen, a strange mix of relief and guilt washing over me. I knew she meant well, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all on a slippery slope and none of us knew where it would lead. Was I really doing the right thing? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that things between me and Mark were changing, and there was no going back. The next few weeks were a strange limbo for me and Mark. We kept in touch, meeting for coffee, lunch, or just a quick chat when our schedules aligned. Each time we met, it felt like we were circling around something, testing the boundaries between friendship and whatever this was turning into. Emma, for her part, kept her distance. She checked in occasionally, but I could tell she was deliberately staying out of things, giving us space. Part of me appreciated it, but another part worried about what she really thought. Was she hoping we'd get together? Or was she secretly dreading that outcome? The confusion lingered until one Friday evening, when everything finally came to a head. Mark texted me around 6 p.m. "I'm going to this new wine bar downtown tonight. Want to join?" I hesitated before replying. It was a casual invite, but I knew that accepting meant stepping further into this gray area we'd been navigating. Still, I couldn't deny that I wanted to see him. "Sure. What time? 7:30? I'll grab us a table." By the time I arrived, the bar was already bustling with people. Mark waved me over from a small, candlelit table in the corner, and I smiled, feeling that familiar flutter in my chest. As I walked over, he stood up to greet me, and I noticed a new tension in his posture. "Hey," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. "You look great." "Thanks." I glanced around the dimly lit bar, noting the cozy atmosphere. "This place is nice. Good choice." We ordered a couple of glasses of wine and settled into conversation. At first, it was easy like it always was, but as the evening went on, the conversation grew more serious. We talked about the breakup, about what it meant for both of us, and where we stood now. "Do you ever feel guilty?" I asked quietly, swirling the wine in my glass. "Guilty?" Mark tilted his head, looking at me with a thoughtful expression. "For what?" "For whatever this is, I murmured, gesturing between us. I mean, Emma pushed us together, but I don't know. I feel like we're walking a fine line. He nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair. Yeah, I get that. But she's the one who made the choice to end things. It wasn't working, and I've accepted that. We're not doing anything wrong by spending time together. Still, I sighed, glancing away. It's complicated, Lily. His voice was gentle, but firm. The only people who get to decide what this is, what we are you and me. Not Emma. Not anyone else. His words hit me harder than I expected. He was right, of course. We were the ones living this, experiencing it firsthand. But that didn't make it any easier to untangle my emotions. I don't want her to regret pushing us together, I whispered. Maybe she won't, Mark said softly. Maybe she'll be happy for us. If we figure this out. I looked up at him, my heart pounding. And what if we don't? He shrugged, giving me a sad smile. Then we figure out how to stay friends. But I think we owe it to ourselves to see where this goes. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. He was right. We'd been dancing around this for too long. It was time to make a choice, to either step forward or walk away. Okay, I whispered, but we need to be honest with each other. Completely honest. No pretending, no holding back. Agreed. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near mine. So, where do we start? I hesitated, then placed my hand on his, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. We start by acknowledging what's been building between us. I care about you, Mark, but I'm scared. Scared of what? He asked softly. Of hurting her. Of messing up what we have. Of losing you as a friend if this doesn't work out. He nodded, his thumb gently brushing the back of my hand. I'm scared too, but I'd rather face that fear with you than keep pretending it's not there. There was a beat of silence, and then I took a deep breath, deciding to be honest with myself for the first time in a long while. I think I might be falling for you, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the bar. Mark's eyes widened, and for a second, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. But then he smiled, a slow, genuine smile that lit up his whole face. Yeah, he murmured, his voice a little unsteady, because I think I might be falling for you too. Relief washed over me, mingled with a nervous thrill I hadn't felt in years. I squeezed his hand, feeling the tension between us ease just a little. So, what do we do now? I asked softly. We take it one step at a time, he said, his gaze steady on mine. We don't rush. We don't hide. We just see what happens. Okay, I agreed, feeling a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. One step at a time. That night, as we left the bar, Mark walked me to my car. But instead of the usual quick hug and awkward goodbye, he paused, his expression uncertain. He stopped, taking a deep breath. Can I kiss you? I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I knew this was the moment, the point of no return. I could say no, keep things as they were and walk away. Or I could say yes, and finally see if all these mixed emotions meant something real. Yes, I whispered, stepping closer. He leaned in, his lips brushing mine softly at first, testing. And then, as if we both realized there was no going back, he deepened the kiss. It was gentle and tentative, but it sent a rush of warmth through me that left me breathless. When we finally pulled apart, we were both smiling, a little dazed. Wow, he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. That was... Yeah, I agreed, still catching my breath. It really was... We stood there for a few more moments, the night air cool around us. Then he kissed me again, slower this time, as if savoring the fact that we were really here, really doing this. Are we okay? I asked softly when we finally stepped back. We're more than okay, he assured me, his smile widening. We're figuring it out. And as I drove home that night, a strange sense of peace settled over me. Things were still messy, still complicated. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being true to myself. I didn't know what the future held for me and Mark, but I knew we were in it together. When I got home, there was a text from Emma waiting for me. "I just want you to be happy, whatever that looks like." I stared at the message, feeling a swell of gratitude and affection for her. She'd let go of her own relationship to give both of us a chance at something real. I didn't know if we'd make it, if this would turn into something lasting or just be a chapter in our lives, but I appreciated her faith in us. "Thank you," I replied. "I'm happy. I hope you are too." And as I turned off my phone and curled up in bed, I realized that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay after all.